This is a two-part series, in which we will discuss about India's future in space. Let's start. An interesting US document called The Future of Space 2060 and Implications for US Strategy states, the US must recognize that in 2060, space will be a major engine of national political, economic and military power for which nations best organize and operate to exploit that potential. The peaceful benefactions of space include the fields of agriculture, health, environment, sustainable development, disaster management, education, human settlement, R&D, transportation, communication, humanitarian assistance as well as international peace and security. Assets placed in outer space by spacefaring nations for these peaceful purposes need to be protected from malignant actions of rogue nations and non-state actors. This is especially so as many of these assets are dual use and thus seen as a threat by rival nations. As an illustration of dual use, Russia has objected to Starlink, Elon Musk's satellite internet providing company managed by SpaceX, being used in Ukraine for military purposes and even threateningly termed the satellites as targets for retaliation. The situation harks back to 1991 when US-led coalition forces drove Iraqi troops out of Kuwait in what was called the First Space War, because of the role that Global Positioning System (GPS) and communication satellites played in the US triumph. In addition to US, China, Europe, Russia, Japan and India have their own equivalent of GPS which, in addition to aerial and surface navigation, are critical to emergency search and rescue, precision farming, financial and banking systems, universal network time synchronization. Crucial communications and remote sensing rely heavily on space assets in low Earth orbit (LEO). Significantly, all these assets are fragile and can be destroyed easily by hard kills, a missile, laser, projectile from the ground or from space, or by soft kills, spoofing, jamming, cyber attacks. There is competition for space mining, landings on Moon, especially on its south pole, and space tourism amongst nations, and private entities like the Blue Moon project of Jeff Bezos of Amazon fame with the capability to mount these operations. The noble and principled motivations for use of space for constructive commercial and scientific projects in the service of mankind are being tempered by militarization and weaponization of space. Here, cyber warfare may be seen as a subset of space weaponization. According to analysts, there are no known or declared orbital weapon systems that are operational, but about a fifth of the total satellites in space belong to the military and have specific military purposes of surveillance or collection of geospatial intelligence, thus posing a peril to peace and security inasmuch as they contribute to a global trust deficit. The insecurity, apprehension, competitive impetus and the associated aggressiveness is leading to the space race becoming one for weaponization of outer space, despite an extant body of international law. It is worth looking briefly at the regulatory mechanisms related to space to understand the framework within which India must work to safeguard its space assets without drawing international opprobrium. Space law implies rules, principles and standards of international law enshrined in 5 international treaties and 5 sets of principles developed under UN auspices besides a variety of international agreements, conventions and resolutions. The Forum for the Development of International Space Law is appropriately called the UN Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space. It has developed the Outer Space Treaty, the Rescue Agreement, the Liability Convention, the Registration Convention and the Moon Agreement as treaties. Significantly, the Outer Space Treaty prohibits countries from placing into orbit around the Earth any objects carrying nuclear weapons or any other kinds of weapons of mass destruction. Besides the treaties, 5 declarations and principles have been developed. There are also resolutions adopted by the UN General Assembly which are not legally binding on the member states but provide guidance for their actions. Some of the nations have elaborate national laws on space use and some have entered into multilateral or bilateral agreements with other nations. The Indian space endeavor has been steered by Indian Space Research Organisation (ISRO), a civilian organization established in 1963 with a focus on space-based applications, space exploration and the development of associated technologies. ISRO is a remarkable success story and is one of the 6 space agencies globally that has full launch capabilities and cryogenic engines as also satellite production wherewithal. It has already sent a manned mission into space, 2 missions to the moon, Chandrayaan-1 and 2, and 1 to Mars, thus making India the 4th nation in the world after Russia, US and the European Space Agency or ESA, to place a space vehicle Mangalyaan in orbit around Mars, and is planning to launch a manned mission to moon, Gaganyaan, in 2024. As Chandrayaan-2 didn't go according to plan, Chandrayaan-3 is planned for next year to replicate the Chandrayaan-2 mission with some changes. Another mission, Aditya L1, is designed to study the solar atmosphere, especially coronal outermost layer of sun heating, solar wind acceleration, coronal magnetometry, origin of near UV solar radiation and magnetic field of the sun. It is likely to be launched next year. L1 indicates the orbit would be one of the 5 possible Lagrange points of equilibrium involving the sun, the Earth and the satellite Aditya L1. India also has in place the Indian Regional Navigation Satellite System IRNSS, called NAVIC, which is an independent regional navigation satellite system, developed indigenously to provide accurate position information service to users in India as well as the region extending up to 1,500 kilometers around. ISRO was not given a military mandate, and India has always maintained a pacific and peaceful approach towards its space program. It is also a signatory to the Outer Space Treaty, formerly known as Treaty on Principles Governing the Activities of States in the Exploration and Use of Outer Space, including the Moon and other celestial bodies. However, in recent years, global developments and trends have brought about a change in the overall Indian approach in view of national security trepidations. Without overtly abandoning its stance of non-weaponization of space, India is addressing the threats to, and defense of, its multifaceted space assets. In this context, the year 2019 marked a significant inflection point, in as much as India consummated Mission Shakti, the testing of an anti-satellite ASAT weapon, and carried out in SpaceX its first tabletop space warfare exercise, which demonstrated use of satellite communications and reconnaissance to integrate intelligence and firepower in the military context. April 2019 also saw the establishment of 2 new space-related agencies, the Defense Space Agency (DSA) and the Defense Space Research Organization (DSRO). DSA is a tri-service agency tasked for space warfare, including ASAT capabilities, satellite intelligence and formulating strategies to protect India's assets and interests in space. The existing Defense Imagery Processing and Analysis Center (DIPAC) and Defense Satellite Control Center (DSCC) have been merged into DSA. DSRO works under the DSA as its parent organization and is tasked to create space warfare weapon systems and associated technologies, as also to find and implement defense applications for India's space technologies. Significantly, the approval for these was given by the Prime Minister of India during the Combined Commanders Conference at Air Force Station, Jodhpur on the 28th of September 2018. It is expected that the DSA will someday be converted into a space command. Despite ISRO being a civilian body without a clearly defined military mandate, India has geosynchronous satellite GSAT-7 in a geosynchronous transfer orbit since 2013 to meet the Indian Navy's multi-band communication requirements over the whole of the Indian Ocean region. It carries payloads in ultra-high frequency UHF-C and Ku bands and provides the Indian Navy with a secure, real-time communication link between its land establishments, surface ships, submarines and aircraft. This was the first military satellite India sent into orbit. The Indian Navy is also purchasing a new satellite, the GSAT-7R. The GSAT-7A was launched for the Indian Air Force (IAF) in 2018, and has 10 channels in Ku-band with switchable frequencies for mobile users, 1 fixed parabolic antenna and 4 steerable antennas. It provides communication between ground radars, airborne early warning and control (AWACS), aircraft and air bases of the IAF, in addition to enabling satellite-controlled operations of unmanned aerial vehicles (UAVs). The IAF's proposal for another satellite GSAT-7C has been accepted by the Defense Acquisition Council (DAC) last year. The acceptance of necessity (AON) for GSAT-7B for the Indian Army was cleared in July this year. So far, the Indian Army had been sharing the GSAT-7A with the IAF. GSAT-7B will meet the Indian Army's communication and surveillance needs. Thanks for watching. Like, share and subscribe.